I threw my daughter out when she was 18 months later. I forgave her. My name is Regina Thompson. I'm 52 years old, and 3 years ago, I did something that nearly destroyed me. I threw my daughter out of my house. Not in a moment of rage, not in a fit of temporary anger, but as a deliberate, agonizing choice. She was 18 years old, legally an adult, and I looked at her across my kitchen table and said the words that would haunt me for months: "You can't live here anymore." Before we dive into today's story, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This story is about boundaries, heartbreak, and what happens when a mother has to choose between enabling destruction and enforcing love the hard way. Trust me, you'll want to hear every word of this journey. Back to our story. Her name is Aaliyah. My only child. The girl I'd raised alone since she was 2, after her father decided that fatherhood was a burden he wasn't interested in carrying. For 16 years, it had been just the two of us against the world. I worked double shifts as a surgical nurse to give her everything: dance classes, a good school, college savings, a home filled with love and structure. And somewhere between 16 and 18, I lost her. Not to drugs, not to violence, but to something equally destructive: a complete abandonment of every value I'd tried to instill. Boys. Parties. Lies that came as easily as breathing. A defiance so complete that it felt like living with a stranger who wore my daughter's face. But let me start at the beginning, because you need to understand how we got there. Aaliyah was a beautiful child. Bright, creative, compassionate. She volunteered at the church food bank, made honor roll every semester, talked about becoming a pediatric nurse like her mother. We had traditions: Sunday morning pancakes, Friday movie nights, shopping trips where we'd laugh until our sides hurt. Then she turned 16, and everything shifted. It started small. Coming home 15 minutes late from a friend's house. Pushing back on curfew with arguments that had just enough logic to make me second-guess my rules. "Mom, I'm 16, not 12. Everyone else gets to stay out until midnight." I should have held the line harder then. But I was tired, bone-tired from 12-hour shifts and single parenting, and I wanted her to feel trusted. So I gave an inch. She took a mile. By 17, Aaliyah had discovered boys with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. There was Marcus first, a smooth-talking senior who picked her up in a car that was definitely not his. Then Darius, who had more tattoos than job prospects. Then Kevin, then Jamal, then names I couldn't keep track of because they changed as often as her excuses. I'm studying at Bree's house. Youth group is running late. Coach extended practice. Every lie delivered with wide, innocent eyes and the confidence of someone who thought I was too tired to check. I wasn't too tired. I was too hopeful. I kept thinking, this is a phase. Teenager's rebel. She'll grow out of it. I remembered my own mother's warnings when I was young, how I'd pushed boundaries and eventually found my way back. So I gave grace, set consequences I didn't always enforce, and prayed every night that my daughter would wake up and remember who she was. But she didn't wake up. She fell deeper. By the time Aaliyah turned 18, my home had become a battlefield. She'd sneak out her bedroom window at night, returning at dawn smelling like cheap cologne and lies. Her grades plummeted from A's to barely passing. She stopped going to church entirely, claiming it was fake and judgmental. The final straw came 3 weeks after her 18th birthday. I came home early from a shift, a rare occurrence because they'd overstaffed the surgical unit, and found my house full of people I didn't know. Music shaking the walls. Empty bottles on my kitchen counter. Aaliyah in the living room, sitting on some boy's lap, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. When she saw me, the laughter died. But not the defiance. "Mom, what are you doing home?" Not an apology. Not embarrassment. Just annoyance that I'd interrupted. "What am I doing home?" I repeated slowly, my voice dangerously quiet. "In my own house?" The question, Aaliyah, is what are you doing? We're just hanging out. It's not a big deal. Get everyone out. Now. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes at me, and said, "You're being dramatic. It's just a few friends." I counted 12 people in my living room and kitchen. Strangers who scattered like roaches when I started turning on all the lights and telling them to leave. Some apologized. Most just grabbed their things and fled. When the house was empty, I stood in my destroyed living room, furniture moved, carpet stained, a lamp broken, and looked at my daughter. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "It's my house too," she shot back. "No. It's my house. I pay the mortgage. I pay the utilities. I work 60 hours a week to keep a roof over your head. And this is how you show respect? I didn't know you'd be home early." "That's not the point." My voice cracked. "The point is you did this at all. The point is you've been lying to me for months. The point is I don't even recognize you anymore." She crossed her arms, chin jutting out in that stubborn way she'd had since she was 3. "Maybe you don't recognize me because you're not looking. You're too busy working all the time to notice anything." That hit like a physical blow. Because there was truth in it, wasn't there? I had been working constantly. But what choice did I have? Single parent, no child support, trying to save for her college while keeping us afloat. "I work," I said carefully, "so you can have a future. So you don't end up like me. Struggling, alone, wondering where your baby's father went. I work so you have choices I never had. Well, maybe I don't want the future you've planned. Maybe I want to make my own choices. Then make them somewhere else." The words were out before I could stop them. Aaliyah's eyes widened. "What?" I took a breath, and in that moment, I made the hardest decision of my life. "You're 18. Legally an adult. If you want to make your own choices, if you want to disrespect my home and my rules, then you can do it somewhere else. Pack your things. You have until the end of the week." "You're kicking me out?" "I'm letting you be the adult you keep claiming you are." She stared at me, waiting for me to take it back. But I didn't. Couldn't. Because I'd reached the end of what I could enable. "Fine," she spat. "I don't need you anyway." She packed that night. Threw clothes into garbage bags with furious movements while I stood in her doorway, every instinct screaming at me to stop this, to pull her into my arms and promise everything would be okay. But I couldn't. Because everything wouldn't be okay if I kept rescuing her from consequences. She called Marcus, or maybe it was Darius, I'd lost track, and he picked her up in that same borrowed car. She walked out my front door with 3 garbage bags and her defiance intact. I didn't cry until I heard the car pull away. Then I collapsed on her bedroom floor, surrounded by the childhood she'd left behind, stuffed animals on the shelf, dance trophies collecting dust, photos of us at Disney World when she was 8 and still thought I hung the moon. I'd just thrown out my only child. My baby girl. The person I'd built my entire life around. And I had no idea if I'd just saved her or destroyed us both. The first week was hell. I jumped every time the phone rang, praying it was her. It never was. My best friend, Monica, called every day. "Have you heard from her?" "No." "Regina, maybe you should reach out. Just to know she's safe. If I reach out, she'll think I'm backing down. She'll think there are no real consequences. But what if something happens to her?" That was the question that kept me awake at night. What if something happened? What if she was in danger and too proud to call? What if my tough love turned into a tragedy? 2 weeks in, I broke. I texted her, "Are you safe?" She responded 6 hours later, "I'm fine." That was all. 2 words that told me she was alive but nothing about where she was, who she was with, or whether she was actually fine or just too stubborn to admit she wasn't. I learned later, months later, that she was couch surfing Marcus's apartment for a week until his roommate complained. Then Darius's mother's house until Aaliyah's attitude wore out that welcome. Then a girlfriend's place, then another. She wasn't homeless, exactly. But she was untethered, drifting between temporary solutions with no plan and no stability. And I was dying inside, wondering if I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Monica kept calling. She'd been my friend since nursing school, had watched Aaliyah grow up, loved her like an aunt. But Monica was also a woman of deep faith, someone who ran a young women's discipleship program at her church. "Regina," she said during one of our coffee meetings, about 6 weeks after I'd put Aaliyah out. I saw her. My heart stopped. Where? Downtown. She was with some friends outside a club. Regina, she looked lost. Did you talk to her? I tried. She saw me and walked away. But I followed her and gave her my card. Told her if she ever needed a place to stay, no lectures, no judgment, my door was open. She'll never call you. Maybe not. But I planted a seed. I wanted to be angry that Monica had interfered. But mostly I was grateful that someone else was looking out for my daughter, even when I couldn't. 3 months after I'd thrown her out, Monica called me at 2 a.m. Regina, she's here. What? Aaliyah. She showed up at my door an hour ago. She's been crying. I don't know the whole story yet, but she asked if the offer was still good. I told her yes. I sat up in bed, fully awake now. Is she okay? Is she hurt? She's safe. She's in my guest room right now. Regina, I need to ask you something, and you're not going to like it. What? I think she needs to stay here for a while. Not come back to you yet. She needs time away from the patterns you two have created. She needs to figure out who she is without boys, without partying, without the rebellion. Every fiber of my being wanted to say no. Wanted to demand Monica bring her home immediately. But I trusted Monica. More importantly, I trusted Monica's program, the discipleship work she did with young women who'd lost their way. How long? As long as it takes. Could be weeks. Could be months. Can I see her? Not yet. She needs to do this work without leaning on you as a safety net. Trust me, Regina. Trust the process. So I did. Because what choice did I have? Monica's discipleship program wasn't gentle. It wasn't about coddling or making excuses. It was about structure, accountability, and complete honesty about the consequences of choices. Aaliyah had to follow house rules, 10 p.m. curfew, no boys, weekly counseling sessions, daily devotionals, and community service 3 days a week. She had to get a job and pay Monica a small amount of rent to learn financial responsibility. She had to attend church and participate in the young women's Bible study. At first, according to Monica, Aaliyah hated it. Complained constantly. Tested every boundary. Tried to manipulate her way out of consequences the same way she'd done with me. But Monica didn't bend. You can leave whenever you want, Monica would tell her. But if you stay, these are the rules. No negotiation. What Aaliyah didn't realize was that structure, real structure with love behind it, was what she'd been craving all along. The boys, the parties, the rebellion, all of it had been a desperate attempt to find boundaries, to find someone who cared enough to say no and mean it. Monica cared enough. And slowly, painfully, Aaliyah began to change. She got a job at a coffee shop. Started showing up on time, taking pride in her work. The manager later told Monica that Aaliyah was one of the most reliable employees she'd ever had, once she committed. She attended counseling sessions with a therapist Monica recommended. Started unpacking the anger she'd carried about her father's abandonment, about the pressure she'd felt to be perfect for me, about the loneliness of being the only child of a single mother who was always working. She participated in Bible study, started asking real questions about faith, about purpose, about becoming the person God created her to be instead of the person boys' attention had convinced her to become. And gradually, the defiance softened into something else. Humility. Self-awareness. The beginning of wisdom. Monica updated me every 2 weeks. Not about everything, some things were between her and Aaliyah, but enough to let me know my daughter was still alive, still progressing. She asked about you today, Monica said during one call, about 4 months into Aaliyah's stay. What did she say? She asked if you hated her. My throat closed. What did you tell her? I told her you loved her enough to let her go. That sometimes love looks like closed doors because open ones only enable destruction. Did she understand? She's starting to. 6 months after I'd thrown her out, Monica called and asked if I'd be willing to meet Aaliyah at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. No pressure. Just a conversation. I said yes before she finished the question. I arrived early, ordered tea I was too nervous to drink, and sat at a corner table watching the door. When Aaliyah walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She was thinner, but healthier looking. Her hair was natural, pulled back in a simple ponytail. No heavy makeup, no provocative clothing, just jeans and a sweater that looked like something I would have picked out for her years ago. But the biggest change was in her eyes. The defiance was gone. In its place was something softer. Uncertainty. Humility. Hope. Hi, Mom, she said quietly. Hi, baby. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Aaliyah spoke. I'm sorry. 2 words I'd waited months to hear, but now that they were here, they broke something open inside me. I'm sorry too, I said. I'm sorry I wasn't there enough. I'm sorry I was so focused on providing that I missed that you were drowning. That's not an excuse for what I did. Monica's been helping me see that. I was hurt and angry, and instead of dealing with it, I decided to punish you by becoming someone you'd hate. Someone I hated. I never hated you. I know that now. But I didn't then. I thought putting me out meant you were done with me. I was done enabling you. There's a difference. She nodded. Monica explained that. She said you loved me enough to let me fall because falling was the only way I'd learn to stand up properly. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, the way we hadn't in years. She told me about the things that had happened during those months, the couch surfing, the times she'd been scared, the moment she'd realized she was headed toward a version of herself she didn't want to become. There was this one night, she said, I was at a party. Some guy was getting aggressive. I looked around and realized I didn't know anyone there. Not really. They weren't friends. They were just people using each other. And I thought, my mom warned me about this. Every single thing she said would happen, happened. And I didn't listen. What changed? I left. Walked out of that party and called Monica. She came and got me at 2 a.m. Didn't lecture me, didn't say I told you so. Just brought me home and said, you ready to do the work now? And I was. I was so tired of being that person. The reunion wasn't immediate. Monica recommended we take it slow, weekly coffee meetings, supervised at first, then gradually building back trust. Aaliyah stayed with Monica for another 3 months while we rebuilt our relationship. We went to counseling together, mother and daughter sessions where we unpacked years of hurt and misunderstanding. I learned that my constant working, while necessary, had made Aaliyah feel abandoned. That she'd craved my attention so desperately that negative attention, through rebellion, felt better than no attention at all. She learned that my rules weren't about control but about protection. That boundaries were gifts, not punishments. We both learned that love sometimes requires distance before it can create real closeness. When Aaliyah finally came home, it was different. She was different. I was different. She moved back in with clear agreements, continue counseling, maintain her job, follow house rules she'd helped create, pay a small amount of rent to learn responsibility. But more than rules, we had relationship. Real relationship, built on honesty instead of performance. She told me about her job, her struggles, her fears. I told her about my own past, my own mistakes, the ways I'd failed and learned. We weren't mother and perfect daughter anymore. We were two imperfect people trying to do better. Aaliyah enrolled in community college. Started taking prerequisites for nursing school. I want to help people the way Monica helped me, she said. The way you help people every day. She began leading a small group at Monica's church for younger teens. Girls who are where I was, she explained. Maybe if they hear my story, they won't have to make all my mistakes. She stayed away from the boys who'd defined her for so long. Started dating intentionally, with boundaries and purpose. When she introduced me to a young man named Christopher, an engineering student who treated her with respect and opened doors, I saw in her eyes that she finally understood her worth. 3 years have passed since that terrible night when I told my daughter to leave. 3 years since I made the hardest choice of my life. Last month, Aaliyah graduated from community college with honors. She's been accepted to a nursing program starting this fall. She has a steady job, healthy friendships, and a relationship with God that's real, not performative. At her graduation, she asked to say something during her speech as the class representative. I want to thank my mother, she said, looking directly at me in the audience. 3 years ago, she loved me enough to let me go. She knew I was destroying myself, and she made the hardest choice a parent can make. She stopped enabling my destruction. She let me fall. And that fall saved my life. She paused, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I'm sorry for those years. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. But I'm grateful, so grateful, that you loved me enough to say no. That you trusted God enough to let go. Because if you hadn't, I wouldn't be standing here today. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when you had to give me up for a while. I was sobbing. Everyone around me was sobbing. Because it wasn't just our story, it was the story of every parent who's had to make impossible choices, hoping love was enough. Today, Aaliyah lives in my house again. But it's not like before. She's not a rebellious teenager. She's a young woman with purpose and vision. We cook dinner together. Go to church together. Laugh about the ridiculous things we used to fight about. And sometimes, late at night when I check on her before bed, an old habit I can't break, I find her reading her Bible or working on homework or texting words of encouragement to one of the girls from her small group. And I thank God. Thank Him for Monica. Thank Him for structure and discipline and consequences. Thank Him for the grace that allowed my daughter to fall without being destroyed.